Sometimes the loudest things in life aren't words. They're the silences you feel when no one is watching. Have you ever noticed how quiet moments can feel louder than any conversation? When a world sleeps, the noise disappears, and suddenly, you hear your own thoughts clearly for the first time all day. Tonight, I want to tell you about a woman who discovered something profound in her silence. Her name was Maya, and her story might sound familiar, because in many ways, it's all of our stories. Maya's days were full, not in the exciting way people describe when their lives overflow with passion and purpose. Full in the way a closet becomes full, packed with things that don't quite fit together, items you've forgotten why you kept, obligations that multiplied when you weren't paying attention. She woke at 6:30 a.m. to her phone's alarm. Before her eyes fully opened, she was scrolling. News headlines, social media, messages from friends, family, coworkers. The digital world rushed in like water through a broken dam, and suddenly she was swimming, moving, responding. Shower, coffee, emails answered while the coffee cooled. The commute filled with podcasts, always something to learn, always productive, always filling the space between leaving and arriving. At work, she was good at her job, not passionate but competent. She answered questions. She attended meetings. She made small talk by the coffee machine about weekend plans and streaming shows everyone was watching. "How are you?" people would ask. "Good. Busy. You know how it is," she'd reply with a smile that had become automatic. And she was busy. The calendar was proof. Color-coded blocks of time designated for productivity, for socializing, for all the things a well-adjusted adult is supposed to do. Lunch with colleagues, laughter about office politics, dinner plans coordinated through group chats, evening workouts streamed on her tablet, video calls with friends scattered across different time zones. She was present in all these moments, smiling, responding, performing the elaborate choreography of a functional life. But something was missing. She couldn't name it during the day. The momentum carried her forward, one task flowing into the next like cars on a highway. Everyone moving fast enough that stopping feels dangerous. The night would come, not gradually but suddenly. One moment she was in motion, and the next she was sitting on her bed, phone on her lap, staring at the wall. The apartment was quiet, not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet, the kind that presses against your chest and makes you aware of your own breathing. She'd pick up her phone, put it down, pick it up again, scroll through social media, other people's highlight reels, carefully curated happiness, perfectly filtered lives. She liked a few posts, not really seeing them, just filling time. But you can't scroll forever. Eventually, the feed ends. Eventually, you run out of distractions. And then would arrive the silence. Not the absence of sound. There were sounds. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the neighbor's muffled television through the wall. But beneath all that, something deeper, a silence that lived inside her. At first, she tried to escape it. She'd turn on music, start a show she'd already seen, text someone, anyone, about nothing in particular. But the silence was patient. It waited. When the music became background noise and the show couldn't hold her attention, when the conversations fizzled into polite good nights, the silence returned. Inevitable, insistent. And with it came the questions. Not dramatic questions. Not crisis-level, existential dread. Just quiet inquiries from a part of herself she'd been ignoring. Am I happy? Is this what I wanted? When did I stop dreaming? Who am I becoming? Questions with no easy answers. Questions she trained herself not to ask during daylight hours when there were tasks to complete and roles to play. But at night, in the silence, there was nowhere to hide from them. Most people fear silence. We live in a world that worships noise, constant stimulation, perpetual connection, endless content. We've built entire industries around helping people avoid quiet moments. But Maya was beginning to understand something. Silence isn't empty. It's full, crowded even, with truths we've been carrying, with feelings we've been postponing, with versions of ourselves we've been neglecting. Silence is a mirror, and mirrors show you what's actually there, not what you wish was there. One night, sitting in that familiar heavy quiet, Maya stopped fighting it. She put her phone face down on the nightstand. She didn't turn on music or search for distraction. She just sat with it. The discomfort was immediate. Her mind wanted to escape, to grasp for something, anything else. But she stayed. And slowly, like eyes adjusting to darkness, she began to see more clearly. She saw that the job she called fine was actually draining her. Not dramatically. There was no villain boss or toxic environment. Just a slow leak of energy day after day, doing work that engaged her skills but not her soul. She saw that some of her friendships had become performances. She loved these people, but somewhere along the way, authenticity had been replaced with pleasantries. They asked, "How are you?" and expected fine. Anything deeper felt like breaking an unspoken rule. She saw that she was carrying expectations that weren't even hers. Her parents' dreams, society's timelines, Instagram's definition of success. All of it piled on her shoulders like invisible weight. And she saw something else, something harder to admit. She saw that she'd been complicit in her own disconnection, that she'd chosen distraction over discomfort so many times that it had become automatic, that she'd built a life that looked good from the outside while feeling hollow from within. The silence wasn't attacking her with these realizations. It was simply showing her, gently, clearly, the way an old friend might point out that you have something in your teeth, awkward but ultimately kind. As the weeks passed, Maya's relationship with silence changed. She stopped dreading it. She started listening. The questions evolved, became more specific, more honest. What am I holding on to that I don't need anymore? She thought about the relationship that had ended 2 years ago. She'd said she was over it, and in many ways she was. But she was still carrying something, not love for him, but a story about herself. A story that said she'd failed, that if she'd been different, better, more something, it would have worked. The silence asked, "Do you still believe that story?" And for the first time, she realized she didn't. The relationship ended because two people grew in different directions. That's not failure. That's just life. But she never stopped to question the narrative she'd constructed. She just carried it, day after day, like a stone in her pocket. What do I actually want beneath all the noise? This was harder. She'd spent so long performing, being the good employee, the supportive friend, the daughter who didn't worry her parents, that her own desires had become background whispers. But in the silence, those whispers grew louder. She wanted to create something, to write, maybe, or paint, something that came from her, not for a paycheck or approval, but because it needed to exist. She wanted deeper conversations, fewer people in her life, but more realness with each one. She wanted mornings without dread, work that felt like contribution, not just completion. Simple things, profound things, things she'd known somewhere deep down, but had never given herself permission to acknowledge. Am I brave enough to change? This was the question that scared her most. Because recognizing what needs to change is one thing. Actually changing it is entirely different. Change means uncertainty. It means disappointing people. It means stepping away from a known path and trusting that there's ground beneath your feet, even when you can't see it. The silence didn't offer her certainty, but it offered her something else. Clarity about what staying the same would cost. Transformation doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or dramatic revelations. It arrives quietly, slowly, in small shifts that accumulate over time until one day you realize you're not the same person you were. For Maya, change started with tiny rebellions against her own patterns. One night, instead of scrolling through her phone until exhaustion pulled her into sleep, she picked up a notebook. She didn't know what to write. She just started. Stream of consciousness. No editing, no performing. Just thoughts flowing on a paper the way water flows downhill, following the easiest path, pooling in unexpected places. She wrote about her day, but also beneath her day, the feeling of sitting in a meeting and realizing she had nothing to contribute because she didn't care about the problem being solved. The weird guilt of ignoring a friend's text because she didn't have the energy to pretend enthusiasm for another happy hour. She wrote, "I'm tired being fine." And seeing those words on paper, her own handwriting, undeniable, something cracked open. She started saying no, not to everything, not dramatically, just selectively. When a colleague asked her to take on an extra project, she paused before automatically agreeing. She asked herself the question that had been living in her silence. Do I have the energy for this? Do I want to? The answer was no. So she said it. I don't think I can take this on right now. The world didn't end. Her colleague found someone else. And Maya felt something she hadn't felt in months. Space. Actual space in her life. She started having different conversations. With one friend, over coffee, instead of a usual surface-level update, she said, "Can I tell you something real?" Her friend looked surprised, then grateful. "Please." And Maya told her about the silence, about the questions, about feeling like she was living a life that looked right, but felt wrong. She expected judgment. Instead, her friend said, "Oh my God, I thought I was the only one." They talked for 3 hours. Really talked. About fears and doubts, and dreams they'd been too embarrassed to admit. About the gap between who they were and who they were pretending to be. Walking home that night, Maya felt lighter. Not because her problems were solved, but because she'd stopped performing, even for just a few hours. She'd been real, and the world hadn't rejected her for it. She started exploring the desires the silence had revealed. She signed up for a writing workshop, not because she wanted to be a writer. She didn't even know if she was any good, but because the act of creating something felt important, like reclaiming a part of herself she'd abandoned. The first piece she wrote was terrible, awkward, self-conscious, but it was hers, and that mattered more than she expected. Here's what Maya learned that might surprise you. The silence never went away, as she didn't want it to. She used to think that growth meant reaching some final destination where everything made sense, where the questions stopped and certainty took over, where she finally became the finished version of herself. But that's not how it works. The silence wasn't a problem to solve. It was a companion, a practice, a regular appointment with the deepest parts of herself. Some nights, the silence still brought discomfort. Questions she didn't want to face. Truths she'd rather postpone. Growth isn't linear. You don't transcend your struggles once and float away on a cloud of enlightenment. But she learned to trust the process, to sit with the discomfort instead of immediately reaching for a distraction, to let the questions exist without forcing immediate answers. She'd learned that not all silences are the same. There's the silence of avoidance, when you're running from something you know you need to face. There's the silence of depression, heavy, gray, pulling you under. But there's also the silence of reflection, the silence of processing, the silence of listening to yourself with the same attention you'd give to someone you love. Maya learned to tell the difference. And when the silence felt dark, genuinely dark, she reached out. To friends, to a therapist, because there's a difference between sitting with discomfort and sitting alone in a crisis. She learned that transformation isn't about becoming someone completely different. It's about removing the layers of who you're not, the expectations, the performances, the stories you've outgrown. Underneath all that, you don't discover a perfect self. You discover a real self. Messy, contradictory, still figuring things out, but authentic. And somehow that's enough. If Maya could go back and talk to the version of herself who first felt that heavy quiet, here's what she'd say. The silence that scares you is the voice of your growth. It's not attacking you. It's not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's your deepest self trying to get your attention, trying to tell you something important. And yes, what it has to say might be uncomfortable. It might challenge the life you've built. It might ask you to change things you've been too afraid to change. But it's also offering you something precious, a chance to stop performing and start living, a chance to close the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be, a chance to build a life that feels true from the inside, not just successful from the outside. The silence will ask you questions you can't immediately answer. That's okay. You don't need all the answers right now. You just need to stop running from the questions. It will show you things about yourself that are hard to see, parts of you that are hurt, parts that are hiding, parts that are ready to grow but haven't been given permission. Look at them with compassion. You're not broken. You're human. And being human means carrying complexity, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, clarity and confusion. The silence will not give you a 5-step plan or a life hack or a quick fix. Transformation doesn't work that way. It's slow. It's subtle. It's a practice, not a destination. But it will give you yourself. And that's worth everything. So if you're listening tonight, if you're in that quiet moment, feeling the weight of unspoken questions, if you're wondering if something is wrong with you because you can't just be happy with what you have, you're not lost. You're not broken. You're not falling apart. You're listening. And that's where a transformation begins. The silence that speaks to you in quiet moments isn't empty. It's full of wisdom, full of truth, full of a next version of you, waiting patiently to be acknowledged. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You don't have to make any big changes tomorrow. You just have to keep listening. Keep sitting with the questions. Keep honoring the parts of yourself that the noise drowns out, because the loudest things in life aren't words. They're the silences you feel when no one is watching, the moments when you're truly alone with yourself, the quiet that won't let you run anymore. And in that silence, if you listen carefully, you'll hear it, the sound of yourself becoming. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, I create more of these contemplations for nights when your mind won't sleep. Subscribe, and we'll sit together in the quiet again soon. Until next time, listen well,